Oh, Fiona Eunson, Senior Planner.
Good afternoon. The Future Urban Development Areas chapter. This chapter proposes a new zoning, a future urban development zoning for 380 hectares at Hallswell and a 60 hectare area at East Belfast. This zoning is proposed as a sort of a transition zoning between the current rural zoning and a residential zoning. And why should we zone these areas this way? Well, we're suggesting this is the way that we need to interpret the direction from the Land Use Recovery Plan and the Canterbury Regional Policy Statement that identifies these areas, amongst a number of others, as greenfield areas for future residential development. Now, these areas aren't new to the Council. They're identified in both the Council's Southwest Area Plan and its Belfast Area Plan as future growth areas, and also in the Urban Development Strategy for Greater Christchurch. And as part of all that, those area plans and the UDS, there was considerable community consultation. So it's not new to the communities either, and with that we've got a lot of technical research that supports this rezoning as part of those area plans. We've built on that with extra information, geotechnical and land contamination research, both desktop studies and also ground testing. So we know that these areas are prone to liquefaction, they've got high water tables, but shortcoming in the type of land can be addressed through proper land treatment at the time of development. What the Land Use Recovery Plan and the Regional Policy Statement say is that the Council's able to stage development in these areas, and that's another reason why we're proposing not to zone these areas at this stage residential, but to signal that they're on that way and call them a future urban development area. The other reason is that we've got analysis that shows that we've got plenty of land zoned for residential development. Of the 20,000 odd residential sites earmarked for future zoning through to residential zoning through to 2028, half of those have already been zoned or in the process of being zoned residential, and another half of that 10,000 have already obtained subdivision consent. So again, we've given this opportunity through the Land Use Recovery Plan and the Regional Policy Statement to stage development so that the Council can plan and fund the infrastructure needed for these areas. And indeed, some of the sewer capacity for the Hallswell area is going to be considered and is being proposed through our asset management and the annual plan process for additional sewage capacity. One key feature with this future urban development zone is the provision of concept plans for 5 discrete areas within the zone. These concept plans identify proposed infrastructure and existing infrastructure and other important features such as roads, stormwater facilities, springs, reserves, heritage items and the likes. At the last presentation, I identified that there were a number of submissions to the Hallswell area through the Stage 1 chapter process, asking that some of these areas be zoned residential now. We've reflected on that since the last presentation, and the major change that we've proposed is actually in the subdivision chapter, where we are proposing to remove the 4 hectare threshold and effectively set a similar limit to that which is in the residential new neighbourhood. That way, proponents for development through the subdivision process aren't restricted by that threshold, and that they can propose a subdivision and as part of the discretionary activity status, as long as they provide for the key infrastructuring elements, above ground ones like the stormwater facilities and roading and reserves, then the application will be able to be considered. And we think that this will be a major gain in terms of winning over the support of those people that want to progress their development now, bearing in mind that there are a number of landowners who still enjoy the rural lifestyle in those areas and want to maintain their rural residential lifestyle. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no idea who's chairing, but we'll go with it. With regards to stormwater facilities, and so the Henderson's Basin area at the moment,
yes,
there are plans and there are some already installed, but as you get closer to the Kennedy's Bush Road at the back, or right at the foot of, say, the south-east or south side of Westmoreland, that hasn't been put in yet we've got a trail of them going through. So is there any way that we can kind of look at getting those put in the right order? So, for instance, if you go down Sparks Road and you're going towards Taitap,
Yes.
on the left hand and the right hand side, you've got stormwater basins.
Yes, that's...
However, the next one that it links to is across the fields towards the foothills, which isn't in place.
It is in place. There's something there in place.
Is there?
Yes,
Okay.
there are some there. I'm aware of that because we've consulted with the asset management staff that have implemented that. So there is some there in place. Just yes, they have the concept plan.
Right.
So if you
Might want to.
there's a concept plan. I think the main one you're referring to is 20.4.5. That's Appendix 20.4.5. And so
Part of the chapter.
that's part of the chapter.
Yep.
Yep.
And I think the area that you're referring to, if you, the red outline denotes the boundary of this particular concept plan and the boundary of the future urban development zone in this area.
Yep.
I think you're referring to land to the north of, sort of northwest of Sparks Road, where that's proposed for residential new neighbourhood, and it's where the Spraydon Lodge exemplar housing proposals gone ahead.
Up there.
So I understand there's, and I'm aware of driving past there, that there is a little bit of stormwater development, detention ponds developed there, sort of near the Mills Road area, and a little bit of connecting with that is on the south side of Sparks Road, and a little bit of the future urban development zone.
Yes, so I guess when we went for a tiki tour, we went there, and the ones that you can see from Sparks Road, no, they're great, and they're all there, but we were told that the next stage would be the next ones built closer to the bottom of the hill. Is that correct? And if so, I'm just
yes.
wondering.
Well, if you look at this map,
Yep.
if you look at the legend, and about halfway down the legend, you'll see stormwater facility, a sort of blue circle with the white waves.
Yep.
Well, if you then go down and look at the diagram, you'll see one down in the kind of the just east of Sutherland.
Yep.
So that's the major facility that council's proposing to develop on that piece of land, a farm that they bought about a year ago.
Okay.
So I think that's what you're referring to.
Okay.
Of the urban, future urban development area, only focus on the southwest area plan and the Belfast area plan, am I right?
Yes, yeah.
But how about Preston or some other area?
Well, a lot of those are
20,000 new subdivision households.
They're either zoned residential or are in the process of being zoned residential through the stage 1 and 2 chapters.
Yeah, but regarding to the infrastructure, facility, etc., I would like to follow the Tim, his question. For instance, like Horsewell area, but there's kind of the Henderson Basin, they have flooding issue, how to mitigate this situation, whether put into this chapter 11 or some other chapter. The flooding,
It's partly recognised through this chapter, but
Yeah.
it's also recognised in the natural hazards chapter.
Yeah.
And then as these areas become developed by developers, then there'll be more sort of intensive review of what's required as part of that, so that as is required for any residential zoning.
Yeah.
So that more intensive research will go on in a sort of a staged process.
So in a sense, these
Yes.
are, correct me if I'm wrong, concept plans. They're not actually the rezoning of land.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So just, we need to start putting affordable and social housing contributions aside, particularly in these in these future urban development areas. So how do we do that, like what they've done in Queenstown? Because clearly we've got social housing in the city, but it's not becoming dispersed. It's actually being prevented from going into some of these new subdivisions. So when do we get a chance to really look at what's being allowed here as we rezone it? Is it this stage or is it the next stage?
It'll be the next stage.
Right,
When
And-
it's zoned.
Yeah.
But these are, as I say, these are concept
yeah.
plans.
So
However,
could we add
if a
something about
developer,
affordable social housing?
if a
in
developer
somewhere?
proposes a subdivision development, a new part of the subdivision rules for this, applying to this chapter, also refers them in the assessment matters to the residential new neighbourhood assessment matters. So those sort of things that are being considered for new residential zones will also be considered should an applicant lodge a subdivision ahead of the council rezoning these future areas for residential into the future.
So do we have anything that kind of shows a direction to get affordable social housing in these areas?
Now, you might recall that that was an issue that we dealt with in stage 1 chapters, and that didn't go through as part of the stage 1 chapters. You might recall we had this whole discussion then as part of the residential chapter.
But that these are future areas, so.
Yes. But we're not zoning them now, so we can't actually, and there's no, because they're not zoned, there's no subdivision consents for these yet either, and it's at that point that potentially you could re-argue that matter.
So can we also look at, again, like that whole cycleways issue?
Well, if you look at any one of the concept plans, councillor, you'll see in the legend that areas for or potential pedestrian and cycle access points are identified. They've kept it reasonably schematic because both the council asset managers and developers like to have some flexibility. So they've just identified the access points, bearing in mind that effectively they're going to traverse these areas and provide linkages either through parks, along stormwaterways or alongside roads.
Right. Okay, and the final question from me is, two questions. One is notable trees. Have we identified any notable trees or significant trees in here that should be flagged?
Let's have a wee look at them.
Probably because it's the Natural and Cultural Heritage chapter.
Yeah, I think for the most part, it is. Yes, there is one. If you actually look at the southeast Horsfall, there was a significant tree identified as part of that exercise. So that's Appendix 20.4.4. Now, they're not necessarily going to coincide with the same process being used for the Natural and Cultural Heritage chapter. This is a high-level document.
So as part of the Natural and Cultural Heritage chapter, we could identify trees in these areas
Yes,
that could be
yes.
protected. And then the final question was just in regards to, it's just slipped my mind. I'm kind of concerned about the geotech stuff that we've done. What I can't, I'm still having trouble understanding why when we get really bad geotech conditions, why would it enable these areas to be classified as future development areas? Like, I would have thought that that work says to us, like, don't go there because it's just, really prone to, natural hazards. So poor land quality, flooding, etc. So has there been any areas within these that have been taken off because the geotech stuff or the assessment just means that it's not?
No, not at this stage. The geotechnical investigation is adequate for rezoning purposes, but they've also acknowledged that more in-depth analysis is needed at the time of subdivision. And subsequent to those geotechnical investigations being taken place, we've also starting to build on our information about natural hazards. And for some of these areas, we've identified some high hazard areas. That's areas that are subject to fairly deep water ponding and localised flooding events. So that sort of information is superimposed on this information, and that will all be considered as part of a subdivision application.
I just worry that in the past we've kind of relied on subdivisions to be the kind of one that flags it. When I read the Royal Commission, it was really clear that they wanted councils and ECAN to be much more proactive in prohibiting areas for development that were subject to high natural risks. So I personally don't agree with the approach that we leave it to subdivision consent. I think we should be doing it now.
Well, effectively, I'm suggesting to you that it is being done now, but not in this chapter. It's actually, like any part of the plan, we've got to look at all the chapters more or less together. And as part of the Stage 2 Natural Hazards chapter, we'll be mapping some of these extended
great.
areas.
So we have an assurance that will be.
Yeah, that'll be there. The
Okay.
information will be there and it will have to be considered.
That's great.
That's just delayed though, the 6
Yeah, no,
weeks.
that's fine,
Yep.
but that's going to happen before we rezone this, so that will
Yes,
inform these.
yes,
So
yes,
that's
this is
important.
not a rezoning.
All right, Tim, did you have a question, did you? Okay, so it's just you, Jimmy? Oh, you've already asked it?
Yes.
Right, do we have any more questions on this? Excellent. Vicky is happy to move it, I think. Are you? I haven't been here. So I did. Oh, actually, Jimmy, thank you for filling in as chair too, Jimmy, while I was there. I've got a meeting later this afternoon and Jimmy will take over just for the remainder of the afternoon, just to let you know. So move. Yep.
Ask a question around that?
Yes,
Yeah.
we've already passed the resolutions for that, but you're welcome
okay.
to ask a question.
No, I just wondered why, because I thought there were areas that were special or character areas that I can't see marked there. Have areas been removed?
No, in fact, we've put areas back in.
But I thought.
Yes. I think it was only the ones, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that it was only the ones where there was absolutely no possible
Yeah,
defence
that's
for them,
right.
as in red zone properties or
That's
something like
correct.
that.
I thought
Okay.
Severn Street and all the river streets were in there as character areas, but
We haven't just carried them over. If they've already been undermined, we haven't carried them over, but we have 2 tranches of character areas. Perhaps if I could take the names of the streets for you and...
So it's the river streets in St Albans, Severn, Thames. You know that? Yeah. So,
Just those 2.
Mersey, they run in parallel.
Okay,
And they run between Westminster and Innis.
okay. Thank you.
Right, we've got those there. Okay, this is moved, Jimmy. Seconded, Phil. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposed.
Okay.
Carried. Thank you very much for that, guys.